The summer heat was brutal that Tuesday afternoon. Tom wiped the sweat off his forehead with his greasy rag and slid back under the old sedan he was working on. His small auto repair shop sat on the edge of town, right off the main highway. It wasn't much to look at, just a two-bay garage with peeling paint and a faded sign that read Tom's Auto Repair. But it was his, and he'd been running it for almost 20 years now at 52. Tom had seen just about everything when it came to cars and customers. He'd fixed engines that shouldn't have been running, dealt with people who couldn't pay, and worked through holidays to keep his business afloat. Life wasn't easy, but he took pride in his work. Every car that left his shop ran better than when it came in, and that meant something to him. The bell above the shop door let out its usual jingle. Tom didn't pay much attention at first. Then he heard it. That deep, rumbling sound of a motorcycle engine cutting off right outside his garage. Something about the sound made him pause. It wasn't just any bike. This was a big one, powerful and loud. Tom rolled out from under the car and sat up, squinting toward the doorway. What he saw made his stomach tighten. Standing in the entrance was one of the biggest men he'd ever seen. The guy had to be well over 6 feet tall, built like he could break a person in half without much effort. He wore a black leather vest covered in patches, the kind that motorcycle clubs wore. His arms were completely covered in dark tattoos, and a thick beard covered most of his face. But what really caught Tom's attention was the long scar running down the left side of the man's face, starting near his eye and disappearing into his beard. Tom recognized him immediately. Everyone in town knew about him. They called him Razor, and he rode with the Death Valley Riders, a motorcycle club that had a reputation for trouble. People whispered stories about bar fights, arrests, and all sorts of illegal activity tied to the club. Whether all the stories were true or not, Tom didn't know. But he knew that most folks crossed the street when they saw Razor coming. The two customers who'd been sitting in the waiting area suddenly got very quiet. One of them, an older woman, waiting for her oil change, grabbed her purse and stood up quickly. "You know what? I just remembered I have an appointment," she said, her voice shaky. She hurried past the biker without making eye contact and practically ran to her car outside. The other customer, a middle-aged man in a business suit, cleared his throat nervously. "I'll just come back tomorrow," he mumbled, following the woman out the door within seconds. Even Tom's young assistant, Danny, suddenly remembered he needed to pick up parts from the supplier across town. "I'll be back in an hour, boss," Danny said, grabbing his keys and disappearing before Tom could say anything. Just like that. The shop was empty, except for Tom and the intimidating biker standing in his doorway. The silence felt heavy. Tom could feel his heart beating faster, but he forced himself to stay calm. He got to his feet, wiping his hands on his work pants, and waited. The big man stepped further into the shop, his heavy boots thudding on the concrete floor. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. His eyes were dark and intense, and his presence seemed to fill the entire space. But Tom noticed something else too. The man looked tired, worried even. "My bike broke down about a quarter-mile up the road," the biker said, his voice rough and deep. "Started overheating, then oil started leaking everywhere. I tried to nurse it here, but it's done. Won't start now." Tom nodded slowly, trying to keep his face neutral. "What kind of bike?" "Custom Harley. 96 cubic inch engine. I've had it for 8 years. Never gave me problems like this before." Despite his nervousness, Tom felt his professional curiosity kick in. He'd worked on plenty of motorcycles over the years. It sounds like it could be the head gasket. "Maybe a cracked engine case, if you've got that much oil leaking. I can take a look at it." The biker shifted his weight, and Tom caught something unexpected in his expression. Desperation. "I need it fixed today," the man said. "I'm heading to Nevada. My mother passed away 3 days ago. Funeral's tomorrow afternoon. I've been riding for 2 days straight trying to get there." The words hung in the air between them. Tom felt something shift in his chest. His own mother had died just 2 years ago, and he remembered that hollow feeling, that desperate need to get to her before it was too late. He'd made it, but barely. The memory still hurt. "I'm sorry for your loss," Tom said quietly, and he meant it. The biker nodded once, his jaw tight. For a moment, the tough exterior cracked just a little, and Tom saw the grief underneath. This wasn't just some scary criminal standing in a shop. This was a son who'd lost his mother and was trying to get to her funeral.
Ow.
"Let me get my truck," Tom said. "We'll tow it back here, and I'll see what I can do." They drove up the highway in Tom's old pickup truck, neither of them saying much. The motorcycle was right where the biker said it would be. It's pulled off onto the shoulder with oil staining the pavement underneath it. Together, they loaded it onto the truck bed. Tom noticed the biker was careful with the machine, almost gentle, despite his rough appearance. Back at the shop, Tom got to work examining the motorcycle while the biker watched. It didn't take long to spot the problems, and they were worse than Tom had hoped. The head gasket was blown, that much was certain. But there was also a crack in the engine case, and the oil pump looked damaged. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. Tom straightened up and took a deep breath. "I've got bad news. You've got a blown head gasket, a cracked engine case, and your oil pump is damaged. This is going to take me at least 4, maybe 5 hours of work. And the parts alone are going to run you about $800, probably more." He watched the biker's face fall. The big man pulled out a worn leather wallet and counted the bills inside. His hands, covered in scars and tattoos, moved slowly as he counted once, then again, as if hoping the number would change. "I've got $340, the biker said finally, his voice quiet. "I need the rest for gas and the funeral expenses. I don't have anyone who can wire me money. My family, we're not exactly doing well financially right now." Tom looked at the money in the biker's hand, then at the broken motorcycle, then back at the man everyone in town feared. He thought about his own mother's funeral, about how nothing else had mattered except getting there in time. He thought about all the times people had helped him when his business was struggling, even when they didn't have to. "Tell you what," Tom heard himself saying. "Give me what you've got now. I'll fix the bike, and you can send me the rest when you're able to. Just get to your mother's funeral." The biker stared at him, his dark eyes searching Tom's face, like he was looking for a trap or a joke. "You don't know me," he said slowly. "Why would you trust me with that kind of money?" Tom shrugged, surprised by his own decision, but somehow sure of it. "Because you need to get to your mother's funeral, and that's more important than money. Everyone deserves that chance. Besides, I figure a man who's willing to ride 2 days straight to get to his mother's funeral is probably good for his word." For a long moment, the biker just stood there, and Tom could have sworn he saw the man's eyes get a little wet. Finally, he nodded and held out his hand. Tom shook it, feeling the firm grip. "Every penny. I promise you that." "I believe you," Tom said. "Now, let me get to work. You've got a funeral to get to." Tom watched as Razor handed over the crumpled bills. $340 counted out carefully on the workbench. The biker's hands were steadier than Tom expected, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost vulnerable. It was strange seeing this huge, intimidating man look so uncertain about accepting help. "You can wait in the office if you want," Tom said, gesturing toward the small room with a couple of old chairs and a coffee maker that had seen better days. "There's water in the fridge, and I think there's some coffee left from this morning. Might be a bit strong by now, though." Razor nodded and headed toward the office while Tom began gathering his tools. The late afternoon sun was streaming through the garage windows, and Tom knew he had his work cut out for him. 5 hours of repairs, maybe more, and he'd be working well into the night. But something about this felt right, even if he couldn't quite explain why. He started by draining what was left of the oil, then began the careful process of removing the damaged parts. Motorcycle engines were different from car engines, more compact and precise. Every bolt had to come out in the right order. Every piece had to be handled carefully. Tom had always liked this kind of work. It required focus, and when he was focused on an engine, everything else seemed to fade away. About an hour into the work, Tom heard footsteps behind him. Razor had come out of the office and was standing a few feet away, watching. Tom glanced up, wondering if the biker was getting impatient, but the man's expression wasn't angry. He looked curious. "You mind if I watch?" Razor asked. "I don't mean to hover. Just been sitting in there thinking too much." Tom understood that. Sometimes the worst thing you could do was sit alone with your thoughts, especially when you were dealing with grief. Pull up that stool if you want, he said, pointing to a metal stool near the workbench. Just don't mind me talking to myself. I tend to do that when I'm working. Razor grabbed the stool and sat down, his large frame making the small seat look like a toy. For a while, they stayed in comfortable silence, with only the sound of Tom's tools clinking and the occasional grunt of effort as he worked on a stubborn bolt. "What's that piece?" Razor asked after a few minutes, pointing to a component Tom had just removed. "That's the oil pump," Tom explained, holding it up to the light. "See these grooves here? They're supposed to be smooth, but they're all scored up. That's what happens when you run low on oil and the engine overheats. The metal grinds against itself." Razor leaned forward, genuinely interested. "How do you know it's not something else? Like, how do you figure out what's wrong when there could be 100 different problems?" Tom found himself smiling a little. It had been a long time since someone asked him about his work with real curiosity. Experience, mostly. But also, you'll learn to listen. Engines talk to you if you pay attention. The sound they make, the way they vibrate, even the smell of the exhaust. Everything tells you something. "I always wanted to learn about engines," Razor said quietly. "When I was a kid, maybe 13 or 14, there was this old mechanic shop near where we lived. I used to stand outside and watch through the window. The owner caught me one day, and instead of chasing me off, he let me come in and watch. Even let me hand him tools sometimes." Tom glanced up from his work. "So why didn't you become a mechanic?" Razor was quiet for a moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on the words before letting them out. "Life got complicated. My dad left when I was 15. Just packed up one day and disappeared. Never heard from him again. My mom was working 2 jobs trying to keep food on the table for me and my 3 younger brothers and sisters. I started running with the wrong crowd. Thought I was being tough, you know? Thought I was helping by bringing in money, even if it wasn't exactly legal." Tom kept working, but he was listening carefully. There was something raw and honest in the way Razor was talking, like he hadn't told this story in a long time, or maybe ever. "One thing led to another," Razor continued. "Got arrested a few times, spent some time in county jail. By the time I was 20, I had a record and a reputation. The motorcycle club took me in, gave me a place where I felt like I belonged. They became my family, you know? But my mom never gave up on me. Never stopped believing I could be better." Tom set down his wrench and looked at the biker directly. "She sounds like she was a good woman." "She was the best," Razor said, and his voice cracked slightly. "And I wasted so much time. She'd been asking me to come visit for weeks. Said she wanted to see me, needed to talk to me about something. But I kept putting it off. Club business, I told her. Always club business. Then 3 days ago, my youngest sister called me. Mom had a heart attack. Gone before the ambulance even got there." The pain in his voice was so raw that Tom felt it in his own chest. He knew that guilt, that bitter taste of time you could never get back. "My mom died 2 years ago," Tom said quietly. "Cancer. She fought it for 8 months, and I kept telling myself I'd spend more time with her when the shop slowed down. She always wanted to take a trip to the ocean, see the sunrise over the water. I kept promising we'd go, kept saying, 'Next month, next month.' She died before we ever made that trip." Razor looked up at him, and for a moment the 2 men just sat there, connected by their shared regret. 2 completely different people from completely different worlds, but grief didn't care about any of that. Loss was loss, and regret was regret. "My wife tells me I need to let it go," Tom continued, turning back to the motorcycle. "Says my mom wouldn't want me carrying that guilt around. She's probably right, but it's hard, you know? That weight doesn't just disappear because someone tells you to put it down."
Razor agreed.
"I know exactly what you mean." They fell back into a rhythm after that, but something had shifted. The atmosphere in the garage felt different, lighter somehow. Razor started asking more questions about the repairs, and Tom found himself explaining things in detail, even showing the biker how to identify worn parts and what to look for in a healthy engine. Around 7 o'clock, Tom's stomach growled loudly enough that both men heard it. Razor actually laughed, a deep sound that seemed to surprise them both. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. Tom had to think about it. "Breakfast, I guess. Maybe around 6 this morning." "There's a diner 2 blocks from here," Razor said. "Let me buy you dinner. Least I can do." Tom started to refuse, but Razor held up his hand. "Look, I know you're doing me a huge favor here, but I need to step away for a bit anyway, and you need to eat. We'll get something quick and bring it back. Pizza or something. Won't take more than 20 minutes. Truth was, Tom was hungry, and a break did sound good. "All right," he agreed. "But I'm buying my own food. You keep your money for the trip." And they ended up at the pizza place down the street, a small family-owned spot that had been there since Tom first opened his shop. They ordered 2 large pizzas and sat at one of the small tables while they waited. The evening crowd was starting to come in, and Tom noticed how people gave Razor a wide berth, how conversations got quieter when he walked past. But sitting across from him now, sharing stories about their mothers and their regrets, Tom didn't see the scary biker everyone else saw. He saw a man who was hurting, who was trying to do right by his mother, even though she was gone. He saw someone who'd made mistakes, but was still fighting to be better. "Can I ask you something?" Razor said as they waited for their order. "Why'd you really agree to help me? And don't give me that line about everyone deserving to get to a funeral. You didn't know about my mom when I first walked in, and everyone else ran out the door." Tom thought about it for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know if I have a good answer. Maybe it's because I remember what it feels like to struggle and have someone give you a chance when they didn't have to. When I first started my shop, I was 3 months behind on rent. The landlord could have kicked me out, but he gave me time to catch up. Said he believed I'd make good on it. I did, but I never forgot that kindness. Maybe I'm just trying to pass it along." Razor nodded slowly. "Well, I won't forget it either. I promise you that." They brought the pizza back to the shop and ate while Tom continued working. The conversation kept flowing naturally, moving from heavy topics to lighter ones. Razor told stories about long rides across the country, about seeing the sun rise over the desert, and camping under stars so bright they looked fake. Tom shared stories about the weird cars he'd worked on over the years, about the time someone brought in a vehicle with a raccoon living in the engine compartment. By the time Tom tightened the last bolt and filled the engine with fresh oil, it was almost midnight. Both men were exhausted, but there was a kind of satisfied tiredness to it. Tom started the motorcycle and the engine roared to life, running smooth and strong. No overheating, no leaks, no strange sounds. Perfect. The sound of the motorcycle engine purring smoothly filled the garage, and Tom felt that familiar satisfaction that came with a job well done. Razor walked around the bike slowly, running his hand along the chrome, checking everything with the careful attention of someone who truly loved their machine. "Oh, take it for a test spin around the block," Tom suggested, wiping his hands on a rag. "Make sure everything feels right to you." Razor nodded and swung his leg over the bike. The engine's rumble echoed off the garage walls as he pulled out into the empty street. Tom watched through the bay door as the red taillight disappeared around the corner. He started cleaning up his tools, organizing them back on the pegboard where they belonged. It was almost 12:30 in the morning now, and his whole body ached from the long day of work. 5 minutes later, the motorcycle returned, and Razor pulled back into the garage with a huge grin on his face. It was the first real smile Tom had seen from him all night, and it completely transformed the big man's appearance. He didn't look scary at all in that moment. He just looked happy. "It runs better than it has in years," Razor said, cutting the engine. "Seriously, I forgot how smooth this thing could be. Whatever you did, it's perfect." Tom felt a warm sense of pride. "Good, that should get you to Nevada and back without any problems. Just keep an eye on the oil level for the first 100 miles or so, and you should be fine." Razor climbed off the bike and stood there for a moment, his expression becoming serious again. He reached out his hand and Tom shook it. The biker's grip was firm, but not aggressive, and he held on for a moment longer than a normal handshake. I don't know how to thank you properly," Razor said. "What you did tonight, trusting me when you had no reason to. Working all these hours to help a stranger get to his mother's funeral, that means more to me than you probably realize." Tom felt a little embarrassed by the gratitude. "You would have done the same for someone else?" "Like to think so," Razor said quietly. But honestly, I'm not sure I would have. I've spent so many years being the guy everyone's afraid of. Being part of a world where you don't trust outsiders, where everyone's looking out for themselves. Tonight reminded me that there's a different way to be. My mom tried to teach me that my whole life, but I guess I needed to see it again. They stood there in the garage. The smell of motor oil and metal hanging in the air. And Tom realized this night had been as important for him as it had been for Razor. He'd been running his shop the same way for 20 years. Playing it safe, keeping his head down, not taking chances on people. When had he become so cautious? When had he stopped seeing people as individuals and started seeing them as risks? You know what my mom used to tell me? Razor said, breaking the silence. She'd say that everyone's got a story, and most people are doing the best they can with what they've got. She said you can't judge someone's whole life by one chapter, especially if you didn't read the chapters that came before. Tom smiled at that. She sounds like she was wise. She was impatient. God, she was patient with me. Razor's voice got thick with emotion. I put her through so much. The arrests, the fights, the years where I barely came around because I was too caught up in club life. And she never stopped loving me, never stopped believing I could be better than I was. That's what mothers do, Tom said softly. My mom was the same way. When I told her I wanted to drop out of college to open a mechanic shop, everyone thought I was crazy. I was 2 years into an engineering degree, had a clear path to a good career, but I hated it. I wanted to work with my hands, wanted to build something of my own. My mom was the only one who didn't try to talk me out of it. She said if it made me happy, then it was the right choice. Was she right? Razor asked. Tom looked around his garage, at the tools he'd collected over 2 decades. At the worn concrete floor stained with years of oil and hard work, at the photos on the wall of cars he'd restored. Yeah, he said. She was right. This place has been my whole life. It's not fancy, and I'm not rich, but I've never regretted it. Well, except for not spending more time with her while I could. Razor nodded, understanding completely. That's what I keep thinking about. All the times she called and I was too busy. All the Sunday dinners I missed because the club had a run planned. All the birthdays and holidays where I showed up late or not at all. I thought I had time. You always think you have time, until you don't, Tom finished. They were quiet for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Razor straightened up and pulled out a worn piece of paper from his pocket. He grabbed a pen from Tom's workbench and wrote something down. This is my sister's phone number, he said, handing the paper to Tom. Her name's Rita. She's the only one in my family who's got her life together. Works as a nurse, got a nice house, always been the responsible one. When I send you the money I owe, it'll come from her. If for some reason you don't hear from me within a month, call her. She'll make sure you get paid. I already told her about you, about what you're doing for me. Tom took the paper and tucked it into his shirt pocket. I trust you. You don't need to do all that. I know I don't need to, Razor said. But I want you to know I'm serious about this. My word might not mean much to most people in this town, but it means something to me. If I say I'm going to pay you back, I'm going to pay you back. I believe you, Tom said, and he meant it. Razor walked back to his motorcycle and threw his leg over it one more time. He put on his helmet and started the engine. The deep rumble filled the garage again, and Tom felt satisfied knowing the bike would carry this man safely to where he needed to go. You be safe out there, Tom called over the engine noise. It's late and you've got a long ride ahead of you. I will, Razor promised. He hesitated for a moment, then added, you know, when I broke down today and walked into your shop, I was having the worst week of my life. My mom was gone, I was broke, my bike was dead, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to make it to the funeral. I figured I'd hit rock bottom. But meeting you, having these conversations tonight, it reminded me that even in the worst times, there's still good people in the world. Still people who will help you when you need it most. Tom felt his throat tighten a little. You get to that funeral. Be there for your family. That's what matters now. Razor nodded, gave a small wave, and then pulled out of the garage. Tom stood in the doorway and watched as the motorcycle's taillight grew smaller and smaller, down the dark highway until it finally disappeared completely into the night. The sound of the engine faded away. Suddenly the garage felt very quiet and very empty. Tom locked up the shop and walked to his truck. His body was exhausted, his back ached, and his hands were stiff from all the detailed work. But there was something else too, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt good about what he'd done. Not just the mechanical work, but the choice he'd made to help someone when he didn't have to see past the reputation and the scary appearance and treat another human being with basic decency and respect. As he drove home through the empty streets, Tom thought about what Razor had said about everyone having a story. How many people had he judged over the years without knowing their stories? How many opportunities had he missed to make a real difference in someone's life because he'd played it safe? His wife was already asleep when he got home, but she'd left a plate of food wrapped up for him in the microwave. He heated it up and sat at the kitchen table, eating in the quiet darkness. Through the window, he could see the stars, bright and clear in the night sky. He wondered how far Razor had gotten, whether he was still riding or had stopped to rest somewhere. Tom finished his food and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy. His mind kept replaying the conversations from the garage, the stories they'd shared, the connection they'd made. Two men from completely different worlds, brought together by a broken motorcycle and a mother's funeral. It seemed almost like fate, though Tom wasn't usually one to believe in such things. He finally drifted off, sometime around 3 in the morning, and his last thought before sleep took him was a simple hope that Razor would make it to his mother's funeral on time, and that somehow, some way, this night would mark a turning point for both of them. 3 days passed, and life at the garage went back to normal. Tom fixed a transmission on a pickup truck, did an oil change on a minivan, and replaced the brakes on an old sedan. Danny came back to work like nothing had happened, though he did ask once about the biker. Tom just told him everything worked out fine and left it at that. But Tom found himself thinking about that night more than he expected. During quiet moments when he was alone in the garage or driving home after work, his mind would drift back to the conversations he'd had with Razor. The stories about their mothers, the regrets they shared, the unexpected connection between two strangers. It had been a long time since Tom had really talked to someone like that, really opened up about things that mattered. On Friday morning, Tom was under a car checking the exhaust system when his cell phone rang. He rolled out and grabbed it from the workbench, not recognizing the number on the screen. For a second, he wondered if it might be Razor calling to say he'd made it to the funeral. But the area code was local. Tom's Auto Repair, he answered, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. Hello? Is this Tom? The voice on the other end was professional, confident, with just a hint of warmth to it. My name is Vincent Chen. I got your number from my brother. Tom's mind raced for a moment, trying to place the name. Your brother? Well, half-brother, technically, Vincent explained. We share the same mother. You might know him as Razor. He called me from the road a few days ago and told me about what you did for him. How you helped him get to our mother's funeral when no one else would. Tom felt his heart speed up a little. Oh yeah, I hope he made it in time. He did, thanks to you, Vincent said. And I wanted to talk to you about something, if you've got a few minutes. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning? Maybe around 10 o'clock? I'd like to discuss a business opportunity with you. Tom was caught off guard. A business opportunity? From Razor's brother? He wasn't sure what to make of it. Sure, I guess. You want to come by the shop? That would be perfect. I'll see you tomorrow at 10. And Tom, thank you for what you did for my brother. It means a lot to our family. After he hung up, Tom stood there staring at his phone, trying to figure out what had just happened. Danny walked past carrying a timing belt and noticed Tom's confused expression. You all right, boss? Danny asked, and Tom said slowly, I think so. Just got a strange phone call. The rest of the day dragged by. Tom couldn't stop wondering what this Vincent guy wanted to talk about. A business opportunity could mean anything. Maybe he needed work done on his car. Maybe he owned a small fleet of vehicles. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Tom tried not to get his hopes up, but his mind kept spinning with possibilities. That evening at dinner, he told his wife about the call. Linda had been with him through all 20 years of running the shop, through the slow months and the busy ones. through the times they could barely pay their bills, and the times when things were comfortable. She knew the business as well as he did. "What do you think he wants?" Linda asked, passing him the mashed potatoes. "I have no idea," Tom admitted. "But Razor mentioned he had a brother who'd done well for himself. Maybe he's just being nice, wants to throw some business my way as a thank you. Or maybe it's something bigger," Linda said, her eyes lighting up. "Either way, it's nice that they're reaching out. Shows you made the right call helping that man." Tom nodded, but part of him was still cautious. He'd learned over the years not to count on things before they happened. Still, he couldn't help feeling a small spark of hope. The next morning, Tom got to the shop early. He cleaned up more than usual, sweeping the floor and organizing the waiting area. At exactly 10 o'clock, a sleek black BMW pulled into the parking lot. Tom watched as a man in an expensive suit stepped out. He looked nothing like Razor. Where the biker was massive and rough, this man was average height, slim, and polished. His hair was neatly styled, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to success. But when he smiled and extended his hand, Tom saw the family resemblance. The eyes were the same, warm and genuine, despite the professional appearance. "Tom, I'm Vincent. Thanks for meeting with me." His handshake was firm and friendly. "No problem," Tom said, suddenly feeling self-conscious about his grease-stained work shirt. "Come on into the office. Can I get you some coffee?" "That would be great, thanks." They sat in Tom's small office, surrounded by file cabinets and car parts catalogs. Vincent looked around with interest, taking in the photos on the wall. The certificates from training programs Tom had completed over the years, the thank you cards from satisfied customers pinned to a bulletin board. "You've been doing this a long time," Vincent observed. 20 years next month," Tom said. Handing him a mug of coffee, Vincent nodded appreciatively. "That's impressive. Building a business and keeping it going that long, especially a small independent shop, that takes real dedication." He took a sip of coffee and set the mug down on the desk. "Let me tell you a little about myself and why I'm here. I own a company called Chen Logistics. We handle deliveries and transportation for businesses all over the region. Right now, we've got a fleet of 43 vehicles, delivery trucks, cargo vans, a few specialized vehicles for specific contracts." Tom listened carefully, still not sure where this was going. "The problem is," Vincent continued, "I've been using the same maintenance contractor for 5 years and I'm not happy with them. They overcharge, they take too long to do repairs, and the quality of work is inconsistent. I've been looking for a new shop to handle our fleet maintenance, but it's hard to find someone you can trust. Then my brother calls me from the road and tells me about this mechanic who stayed up half the night to fix his bike, who trusted him enough to let him pay later, who treated him like a human being instead of a criminal."
Oh.
Tom felt his pulse quicken. He was starting to understand what Vincent was suggesting, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. "I did some research on you," Vincent said. "Called a few of your customers, checked your business record, looked at your reviews online. Everything I found told me you're exactly the kind of person I want to work with. Someone who takes pride in their work, treats people fairly, and stands behind what they do." "I appreciate that," Tom said carefully. "But I'm just a small operation. 2 bays, me and 1 assistant most days. I'm not set up to handle a big fleet." "I understand that," Vincent said. "But here's what I'm thinking. I need someone I can trust, and trust is worth more to me than a big fancy facility. What if we started small? Maybe you take on routine maintenance for a few of our vehicles, see how it goes. If it works out, we expand from there. I'd be willing to help you upgrade your equipment, maybe expand your space if needed. The contract would guarantee you steady income, and you'd have the flexibility to keep taking on your regular customers too." Tom's mind was racing. This could change everything. Steady income from a fleet contract would stabilize his business in ways he'd never had before. No more worrying about slow months. No more lying awake at night wondering if he could make rent. "How much work are we talking about?" Tom asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Vincent pulled out his phone and opened a spreadsheet. "Based on our current maintenance schedule, I estimate it would be somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 a month in regular work. More if there are emergency repairs or major issues." Tom nearly choked on his coffee. $12,000 a month was more than he made in some quarters. That kind of steady income would be life-changing. I can see you're surprised, Vincent said with a slight smile. Let me be clear about something. This isn't charity, and it's not just because you helped my brother, though that certainly got my attention. I'm a businessman, and I need quality work done on my vehicles. But what you did for Razor showed me your character, and character matters to me. I've worked with plenty of people who talk a good game, but don't follow through. You didn't just talk about kindness or trust. You showed it when it mattered. Tom sat back in his chair, trying to process everything. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately, to jump at this incredible opportunity. But another part of him was cautious, worried about taking on more than he could handle. "Can I ask you something?" Tom said. "Why is this so important to you? I mean, there are bigger shops out there with more resources." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his expression becoming more serious. "My brother and I had the same mother, but we grew up differently. Different fathers, different circumstances. I got lucky. My dad stuck around, pushed me to do well in school, helped me go to college. I got opportunities that my brother never had. But our mother loved us both the same, never made either of us feel less important. When she got sick, I was able to help her financially, make sure she had good care. But you know what she talked about most in those last few weeks? She talked about my brother. About wanting him to find his way, to see that he could be more than what people expected him to be." Vincent's eyes got a little misty, and he cleared his throat. "When my brother called me from the road and told me about you, about how you trusted him and treated him with respect, I could hear something different in his voice. Hope, maybe. Like he'd been reminded that the world isn't just the hard, cold place he'd experienced for so many years. That's worth something to me. That's worth a lot, actually." Tom felt a lump forming in his throat. He understood exactly what Vincent meant, because he'd felt that same thing in his garage 3 nights ago. That moment of human connection that reminded you why kindness mattered. Tom sat across from Vincent, feeling the weight of the decision in front of him. This was the kind of opportunity he'd dreamed about, but never really expected to get. His mind was already racing through the possibilities. He could hire more help, upgrade his equipment, maybe even expand the garage. But he forced himself to slow down and think clearly. "I need to be honest with you," Tom said. "This would be a big step for me. I'd need to bring on at least 1 more full-time mechanic, maybe 2. I'd have to reorganize my whole schedule to make sure your vehicles get priority without abandoning my regular customers. It's going to take some time to scale up properly." Vincent nodded, clearly appreciating the honest response. "I wouldn't expect you to do it all overnight. What if we start with a trial period? 3 months. I'll send you 5 vehicles to start with, just for routine maintenance and minor repairs. That gives you time to adjust. Hire someone if you need to. Figure out the workflow. If it goes well, we expand to the full fleet. If it doesn't work out for either of us, no hard feelings." Tom thought about it. Starting small made sense. It would give him a chance to prove himself without being overwhelmed. "That sounds reasonable. When would you want to start?" "How about 2 weeks from now? That gives you time to prepare, and it gives me time to draw up a proper contract and get my current provider transitioned out." Tom extended his hand across the desk. "You've got a deal." Vincent's smile was genuine as he shook Tom's hand. "I'll have my lawyer send over the paperwork early next week. And Tom, I really think this is going to work out well for both of us." After Vincent left, Tom sat alone in his office for a long moment, staring at the wall. Then he picked up his phone and called Linda. She answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" she asked, the anticipation clear in her voice. "We're going to need to talk about hiring someone," Tom said, unable to keep the smile out of his voice, "and maybe looking at a bigger space." Linda let out a squeal of excitement that made Tom pull the phone away from his ear. "Oh my God, Tom. This is amazing. I'm so proud of you." "I didn't really do anything," Tom said. "I just fixed a motorcycle." "You did a lot more than that," Linda insisted. "You saw someone who needed help, and you helped them. That's everything." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Tom interviewed 3 candidates for a mechanic position and hired a guy named Ray. a skilled technician in his 40s who'd been laid off when the dealership he worked for closed down. He invested in some new diagnostic equipment and reorganized the garage to make the workflow more efficient. Danny was excited about the expansion, happy to finally have another experienced mechanic to work with. On a Wednesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the meeting with Vincent, the first delivery truck arrived for service. It was a straightforward oil change and brake inspection, nothing complicated. But Tom treated it like the most important job he'd ever done. He documented everything carefully, took his time, made sure every detail was perfect. Over the next month, 4 more vehicles came through for regular maintenance. Each time, Tom gave them the same meticulous attention. Vincent would occasionally stop by to check on things, and he was always pleased with the work. By the end of the 3-month trial period, it was clear the arrangement was working perfectly. "I want to move forward with the full contract," Vincent told Tom one afternoon. "You've exceeded every expectation. My drivers are telling me the vehicles are running better than they have in years." Tom signed the expanded contract, and suddenly his business was transformed. The steady income from the fleet maintenance provided a solid foundation, and word started spreading about his quality work. Other businesses began approaching him about maintaining their vehicles. Within 6 months, Tom had hired 2 more mechanics and moved to a larger facility with 4 bays instead of 2. But the biggest surprise came about 2 months after the contract started. Tom was working late one evening when he heard a familiar rumble outside. He walked to the bay door and saw Razor pulling up on his motorcycle. The biker looked different somehow. He'd trimmed his beard neatly, and while he still wore his leather vest, something about his whole demeanor seemed more relaxed, more at peace. "Hey, stranger," Tom called out, genuinely happy to see him. "How've you been?" Razor climbed off his bike with a big smile. "Really good, actually. I wanted to come by and thank you in person, and to pay you back." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "That's the full amount I owed you, plus a little extra for the late payment." Tom took the envelope but waved off the extra. "You don't owe me anything extra. We had an agreement." "Take it anyway," Razor insisted. "You changed my life that night, Tom. I'm not exaggerating." They walked into the office, and Razor told Tom what had been happening since the funeral. After saying goodbye to his mother and spending time with his family, he'd had some long conversations with Vincent. His brother had offered him a job managing one of the warehouse facilities, a real job with benefits and steady pay. "I took it," Razor said. "And I've been clean from the club for 2 months now. Turned in my patches, walked away from that life. It wasn't easy, and I lost some people I thought were friends. But my real family is back in my life now. My sister talks to me again. My youngest brother looks up to me for the first time in years. I'm actually being the man my mother always believed I could be." Tom felt emotion welling up in his chest. "That's incredible, man. I'm really happy for you." "Taking some classes too," Razor continued. "Auto mechanics certification program at the community college. Figure if I'm going to start over, might as well pursue that dream I had as a kid. Vincent says once I'm certified, he might have a position for me in fleet maintenance." He grinned. "Maybe I'll end up working on trucks that you service." They talked for over an hour, catching up on everything that had happened. Razor showed Tom photos on his phone of his family, of the small apartment he'd rented, of the warehouse where he worked. He looked genuinely happy, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "You know what the crazy thing is?" Razor said as he was getting ready to leave. "That night when my bike broke down, I thought it was the worst luck in the world. I was angry, frustrated, ready to give up on everything. But breaking down in front of your shop, meeting you, having those conversations, it changed the direction of my entire life. Sometimes what seems like bad luck is actually the universe pushing you toward where you need to be." Tom walked him out to his motorcycle. The evening air was cool and pleasant, and the sun was just starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Before I go," Razor said, "I want you to know something. You didn't just help me get to a funeral. You reminded me that I was worth helping, that people could still see good in me when I'd almost stopped seeing it in myself. That's a gift you gave me, whether you meant to or not." Tom didn't know what to say to that. He just pulled the big man into a hug and Razor hugged him back without hesitation. "You take care of yourself," Tom said, "and come by any time. You're always welcome here." "I will," Razor promised. He put on his helmet, started the bike, gave one last wave before riding off into the sunset. Tom stood there watching until the taillight disappeared, thinking about how strange and wonderful life could be. One decision to help a stranger, one night of working late and sharing stories, and everything had changed. His business was thriving in ways he'd never imagined. He'd made a real difference in someone's life, and he'd been reminded of something his mother used to tell him, something he'd forgotten over the years of just grinding through each day. She used to say that kindness wasn't something you did when it was convenient or safe or easy. Real kindness was choosing to help someone even when you didn't have to, even when it cost you something, even when you didn't know if you'd ever see a return on it. Because the point wasn't the return. The point was being the kind of person who helped. 5 years later, Tom's business had grown into one of the most successful independent auto shops in the region. He had 12 employees now. His reputation for quality work and fair dealing brought in customers from 3 counties over. He'd been able to send his daughter to college without loans, had finally taken Linda on that trip to Europe she'd always wanted, and had even started a small scholarship fund at the community college for students studying automotive technology. And every few weeks, Razor would stop by, sometimes to help out with a particularly heavy job, sometimes just to grab lunch and catch up. He'd completed his certification, was engaged to a wonderful woman he'd met at his sister's church, and was working as Vincent's fleet maintenance coordinator. He'd become one of Tom's closest friends, and nobody who knew their story could quite believe how it had all started. On the 5-year anniversary of that night, Tom was locking up the shop when he noticed something attached to the door. It was a small plaque, professionally made, with an inscription that read, "Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves a chance. Everyone matters." Below it was a note in Razor's handwriting. "Thanks for teaching me this, brother. Never forget." Tom stood there reading it over and over, feeling grateful for the broken motorcycle, the late-night repair, and the reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply see another person's humanity and respond to it with your own. That one choice, that one night, had changed lives forever, and neither of them would ever be the same.